Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, and good evening. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 776. This is the pre-show, that magical, marvelous time of the program where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. 'Tis the season. Merry Christmas. Got the fireplace going here. Why not? Let's crank it up. Come on now. It's past Thanksgiving. So it's November 30th, 2020, the year that never ends. And let's see if I can get the old embed code going here. Been a busy day at the weather office. Typically, when it's busy where I am this time of the year, it's either severe thunderstorms, flooding, or tornadoes. But no, today we had snow. Snow doesn't fall that often here in November, but we certainly had some today. I'll show you some pictures here in just a second. Or if you follow me on the Twitter or the Facebag, you probably saw some of them. I process a lot of pictures on days like today. I mean, a lot. And I'm honored when people send them to me. Think of all the weather people in the world. How about that? This is Alabama today, November 30th. Wow. And we actually had some lake effect snow today coming off the Tennessee River. This is a town called Arab, which is a little south of Huntsville. And this was, typically with the northwest flow deal like this and a trough coming in, it doesn't bring a lot of moisture. You don't get that much, but sometimes a little fetch will set up off the Tennessee River, and you can have some pretty remarkable snow amounts here. In fact, show you kind of what it looked like up there. This was during some of the heavier snow showers. I mean, come on now. Hey, Buffalo, we're watching you down here. But anyway, let's get the guests on here. Enough of that. See if we can find some other friends. All right, let's invite by email. Still working out of Studio S here, needless to say, and we'll be for the rest of 2020. So we'll have a hard out each Monday night for the rest of the year, meaning we have to be out by about 9:45 Central. All right, here we go. I know that Jen is going to be out tonight. And of course, Kim is on maternity leave. But she'll be back. I can't wait to get Kim back. But before you know it, it's going to be time for the year ender with Greg Carbon. And we'll look back on the meteorological memories of 2020. Not that anybody wants to look back on this year, but that's always fun. We do that show, it's our last show of the year. And this year we're going to record it, I want to say on a weekday morning. I will actually try and take a second vacation week around Christmas. So we're going to record that probably on the morning of the 22nd, December 22nd. That'll be a Tuesday morning special at 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern. I wonder if anybody will be awake for that. And then I'll take that next week off. And when I come back, it'll be 2021. Bill, it's cold. I had to crank up the fire back here.
I was going to say, that's a beautiful setup right there.
Right, yes.
Yeah, you need it tonight. I tell you what, there's some snowflakes flying out there earlier, James Spann.
How about that lake effect snow?
Hi.
Hey, Barb. Wind Barb.
Wind Barb.
Barb, you ought to run while you can. Get while the getting's good.
No. I'm in for it now.
Hang up and run. That's what the wise guests do at this time, because we're not on the air yet. Well, we are on the air, but the produced show hasn't started yet. So
now 750 some odd shows. Nobody's ever run, James, have they?
Not till after they're done.
Oh, surely somebody's run. I know people have hung up on us before during the show.
I want to do a quick audio check with you all. Am I okay, or should I put in earbuds? How am I
I'm
sounding?
not hearing any feedback. It's better if you have them, but if you don't, that's okay.
I do.
Because it's theoretically, Zoom has an algorithm that suppresses that if you have speakers on, but it doesn't always work.
It got worse when
And
you
I
put them in.
and I just heard an echo from somebody's channel. I think it's from Michael's channel.
Oh, Michael.
Hang on.
Yeah,
Hang on
it's
for
not
just
from
a second.
Barb's. Okay. National
It's
Weather
probably-
Service Northern.
Probably from mine. Probably from mine. Hang on a second.
Yeah, if you can slap some earbuds in, then that should solve that problem pretty easily.
I've got mine in now, sound check. Other than the echo.
Yes. Thank you.
Hang on a second here. I will mute myself for just a moment.
I can show some more snow pictures. This was the deep south today, Alabama.
More than up
It
here.
was pretty remarkable. This was this evening just east of Birmingham. And again, it was just coming down with a little fetch over the Tennessee River, lake effect snow in Alabama. But I mean, come on now. You don't see scenes like this that often. Down here in November. Very festive. But the best part is always the pictures of the kids. And some of the people that send me these photographs, they take some remarkable images. These are not crummy phone shots. These are like real camera shots taken today. Of course, I love cows. So anytime you send me video of snow with cows, that's going to be on television, or donkeys. I'll even take that. I probably have processed at least 1,200 photos and videos today. And I'm not even close to being finished. But I'm honored when they all send them to me. Think of all the weather people in the world, and they chose little old me. So
well, they know you'll put them to good use.
I will get them on. I can't show them all on TV or get them on the social or whatever, but I see them all, and I am thankful for them all.
Your weather closet has gotten an upgrade there, James. When did they put in the fireplace?
This was we had a total renovation. It's called rip a YouTube video and stick it on the chroma key behind you, because we all know in reality there's nothing back there.
Are you working from home now, or are you at the?
Yes, I will be in Studio S for the rest of the year. So we'll have a hard out every Monday night. See, this is the real deal right here. See, I mean,
that's a lovely shade of green.
I'm lifting up my skirt to the world here, but weather people live in front of green walls. That's just what we do. So, but let's put that back. There's something about that just warms my soul here. So,
it goes so well with the snow you were just showing.
Yeah, it really does. And it's cold down here. I mean, we're pretty cold for November. So it's time to start. Got Troy.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, Barb.
Hi, Troy. How are you?
Doing good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So I'm trying to talk. I don't know if you can still get echoes or not.
Your audio is a little distorted for some reason.
So I have one other choice on this whole thing. I'm trying to use my new earbuds, and they're not very good. So I can do air traffic controller if you want.
Let's do it. I like it.
Sorry.
Get the headset thing going. I mean, come on. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go.
Let's go live to the Democratic National Convention on the floor. And Dan Rather.
But now no sound.
Yeah, nobody knows who Dan Rather is. You'll have to change the settings in the Zoom for your audio.
There you are.
Yeah, you're good.
There we go.
Sounds Sounds great.
Delta 1437 clear for takeoff.
Yeah, you're clear. There's hello and thank you for tonight. Tonight's in-home movie will be put your trays and tables in upright position and everything's good.
All right, let's get this.
You do that too well, Michael. You do
I
that.
know.
He's been on too many airplanes, is what it is. All right, here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains, this is episode number 776. It's the weekly show that's all about weather. This is for November 30th, 2020, the year that never ends. Or will it? Guess we'll find out in about a month. Troy, how'd the Horns do? How'd the Hook'em Horns do Saturday? Did y'all have a big win?
On Friday, actually, and no. Iowa State.
That was mean.
Iowa State actually came back on that one, and not for the will of trying. The Longhorns and we were looking for thunder and lightning in that game. It was an overrunning pattern, and didn't end up getting that much. Thunderstorm very early in the morning, but long before the game started southeast of the field. But just a rainy day, and the Horns lost it there in the last 2 minutes, I guess, of that ball game. So, but my Aggies won.
There we go. I was going to say,
there we go.
Okay, though.
Yep.
So they played what, LSU? Saturday night?
Yeah, in a rainy day in College Station on Saturday. So
there you go. Rainy days and football games sometimes go together. So Bill Murray is on the show here, I see. And again, we're a little thin tonight. We're missing some. I know that Jen is off. She'll be back next week. Nate, we know he's off. Tony Rice has a stomach flu. He's off. But anyway,
and Aubrey's whipping somebody into shape on the wall tonight.
Yeah, Aubrey's training somebody, and then we've got Kim on maternity leave. But the important people are here tonight. That's all I can say. But Bill is eating from the House of Hunan.
Well,
tonight
no. You know, they say that people are having trouble because they have so many leftovers. So I'm just taking care of leftovers. This is pumpkin pie.
Okay.
Homemade pumpkin
pie. He's sucking that down over there. I mean, I hate to toss to him, but I've got to toss to him to introduce our guests.
Well,
we get pumpkin pie splattered all over his microphone.
I'm the guy that had a salad 30 minutes ago with a little turkey on top of it. So,
well, the diet starts tomorrow, Troy. But my beautiful wife brought me this pumpkin pie that she made, and she made me some coffee. So I am set for the show. But we are a little thin on panelists tonight, so we had to recruit one. And it was good timing. So, but anyway, tonight's guest panelist is the WCM at the National Weather Service in Northern Indiana, Michael Lewis. Welcome to WeatherBrains.
Hey, man, this is the first time I've done anything like this, so you'll have to bear with me. I haven't done a live podcast in ever. I've done other live recordings, but
I was going to tell you, Michael, to bear with us. I was going to put it the other way around. You may have to bear with us.
Well, I was a little worried.
Always to hang up and run while you can.
Well, I was a little worried. You're saying, well, we don't have this person, we don't have that person, we don't have this person, we don't have that, and we have Mike Lewis. But hey.
So you're in charge of the questioning tonight, Michael. So I'm going to turn it over to you in just a minute, and you have to pick at the end. But we did want to have you on tonight because you're one of the leaders of the National Skywarn Recognition Day that's coming up. So we want to promote that event exclusively and not exclusively, but extensively a little bit later on tonight and talk about that. But so give us the elevator pitch about that before we get started with Barb for a little bit tonight.
Well, thank you for letting me speak about Skywarn Recognition Day. So that's my radio voice.
Boy,
but hey,
the big pipes are coming.
The big pipes.
I have that big microphone. It's that air traffic controlled microphone here. I'm making sure dispatch. But no,
you're not playing Fortnite while you're on the show.
Actually, I do have that over on the side screen here. So if I get distracted,
if this gets boring, just go play your game. Yeah,
that's got a weather element to it though too.
Everything, man. It's got everything. But no, I really appreciate the opportunity. Skywarn Recognition Day. This is one of those 2020. Who would have thunk in 2019 that we would have something like 2020? I mean, This is a crazy year, crazy year. So we had to make a huge rethinking. The game had to be replayed, and we made all new rules, and who knows what's going to happen. But we've gone all virtual. Weather service offices are not allowed to have volunteers into their buildings. So that was kind of the whole emphasis behind Skywarn Recognition Day, was to try to get those amateur radio networks up and hit as many weather service offices. But, it's funny because over the last 5 years or so, with all the social media that's showing up inside of everybody's weather service offices, there has been a lot more emphasis placed on and a lot more opportunity to interact with all Skywarn spotters. And so this year we're doing something different. And it's going to be, there's an amateur radio component. We have about 600 amateur radio people registered all over the United States. We've got about 23 or 24 weather service offices that are going to participate, but they're doing it remotely. So they have other off-site amateur radio guys and women. I said guys, I meant that inclusively. But we have amateur radio folks out there that are going to be operating as weather service. And so really it's a matter of trying to get everybody talking to as many ways and as many places as possible. New this year, we're going to have a Facebook Skywarn Recognition Day group page, and we're going to be hosting a series of live streams. Man, that coffee looks good. I'm sorry. We're going to be doing
so good.
We're going to be doing live streaming events. We have hopefully we're going to get Tsunami Warning Center. Going to talk a little bit about what they do. We have live stream balloon launches. We've got several offices that are going to do it at 0Z, several that are going to do it at the 12Z launch. And so we're going to try to get as many of those streaming as live. And we also have the Year in Review by Greg Carbon. He's going to be presenting probably a video, but it's going to be good. And we have an SPC internal look and I don't know, all kinds of stuff. Amateur radio. How do you operate amateur radio? How do you get a license? We're going to get people doing stuff with that. So we're going to use the Facebook group page to do a lot of live streaming and engaging as many spotters as we can across the country. So Skywarn Recognition Day is our one day to actually really recognize large group of Skywarn spotters.
Michael,
that's my pitch.
Yeah, Michael, real quick, and I'll ask you this a little later, but how old is Skywarn?
Oh, it's a young adult. It's a young adult. I started in 1999. Scott Menser out there in the plains started this thing, and it was really about getting HF radios into the weather service and connecting to all of them. But 1999 was the first year. I've been involved with it on and off, but then the last 3 years I've been helping to keep it moving, along with two amateur radio guys from up in Gray, Maine. Mike Corey and Rob Macedo are just unbelievable workhorses. I got Charlie Woodrum down in the Southeast is helping me, so it's really been good.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. He's a whew, man. I'm telling you,
yeah.
I'm getting tired. But no, so it's good, and I'm excited. This will be different too because we're trying to get all Skywarn. It has been primarily amateur radio. We think that we need to get them all involved. We need to get all Skywarn spotters involved, and that's really what we're trying to do this year: is engage at as many levels as we can. COVID or no COVID, we still need spotters.
Yep.
So that's my pitch.
Well, that's awesome. That's what we wanted to hear, and we want to hear more ways we can all get involved if we can. Michael,
yeah,
maybe
you can
share all those things with us a little bit later. But now, raise your right hand, Michael, because we have to swear you in. Troy's our bailiff here; he has to swear you in. But you're a panelist now, so you have to come up with great questions.
What
for our WeatherBrain tonight? So.
No, you weather and brains.
Yeah,
we were surprised when
Michael on my own yet.
Name.
So yeah,
that name.
No. So the panelists, you have to do three things. You share what? Boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and you say something outrageous. That's all you have to do. So.
Oh, okay. I'm a WCM. That can happen.
I know a lot of WCMs with some really boring personal stories. So it's
Mine may not be well, they'll be personal. I don't know how boring they'll be, but they'll be
They
personal.
might be outrageous. I mean, that knock two birds out with one stone there. Yeah.
They could end up as a show title, Michael. So
Yeah, exactly.
just be careful. But we're so glad you're with us tonight. And
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
please jump in. We're thrilled that you're part of the show tonight. So tonight's guest weather brain is a civil servant, federal scientist, meteorological instructor for NOAA's National Weather Service. She's WinBarb on Twitter. Dr. Barb Mays Boosted, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So,
hey, Barb, it's been a long time. I was
How are
down
you
there at some
doing?
point in time.
I was gonna say how you guys knew each other, but I knew you had to. So
Yeah, we've crossed
It's
paths,
2 degrees of separation in the weather service. You almost always cross paths with somebody.
especially if you have to do training, which we have to do. So
So
good.
Barb, I'll start with you for the obligatory question. How'd you get started in weather? And it probably has a role in what we're going to talk a good bit about tonight. And then Michael, I'll ask you the same question.
There seem to be 2 classic stories for meteorologists. Either there's the big event that hooked you in, or the fear that grew into interest. And I'm in that second camp. I was a 4-year-old who was scared of thunderstorms. So I'd go hop in my parents' or my sister's bed, and they got tired of it. My mom and my sister took me to the library, got me all the books about weather so we could read about it and I could learn about it, and then, soothe my fears. And what I learned when I read the books is that if you want to take shelter from a storm, you should be in the interior of your house. So instead of crashing in their beds, I went and slept in the hallway. But
Nice.
but that's where the interest grew. And I was through all the books in the library by age 5 and doing my science fair projects on weather and in elementary school, and it stuck with me. I did go through a phase where I also wanted to be a teacher, so I guess ending up as a meteorologist and instructor was probably not too accidental. But my interest in Laura Ingalls Wilder grew kind of the same way. It started with reading books too.
So when your mom brought you a Wilder book, you said you rolled your eyes the first time, but then you read it.
I did. I saw the cover and it's these 2 little kids in a wagon. I was like, oh, really, Mom? And she's like, just read it. You're going to love it. And
what does this have to do with weather? What does this have to do with weather?
Little did she know.
And boy, did it ever. So Michael, you answer that same question, the obligatory question that we always have to ask. How did you get into weather?
Oh yeah, Laura Ingalls Wilder. I guess no. No.
Yeah.
So
book number 6, right?
Yeah. So Barb's saying about how she was afraid of it, and I guess I don't know if y'all know April 3rd of 1974.
Yep. I've got some slides right here.
I got a map. I have it framed. I don't know. It's in one of the walls in here. But April 3rd, 74. I was 12 years old, and
oh wow, we were the same age.
Are we?
You, Mike? Where were you that night?
I was in Cincinnati.
Oh,
in the far, I was in the far west side of Cincinnati near the Indiana border. And so, I mean, I remember the day because my brother is younger than me and he would build kites. He built kites. I mean, he still does. And we were building barrage kites. I know this is a weird story, okay, but you said I had to be personal.
It's a good story.
So we were making barrage
we love
kites.
Weird stories.
So he would make barrage kites, and we started making these and flying them, and that was a good day to fly because it was warm and windy and crazy. And so we were flying kites, and it started getting stormy and kind of dark. And I said, well, we wheeled them back in, and we had bikes that we had converted over to reel these things in, and we reeled them in, put them in the basement, and it started getting dark, and I heard my first outdoor warning siren. That was the first time I ever remember, hearing something like that. We lived on a farm, and it overlooked a huge apple orchard. And so I was watching the storm. Little did I know it was the supercell, and it was the one that actually went in and hit Xenia, but it came through the Sailor Park area, and it was black and ominous. And I just remember seeing how dark it was below against the vividly blue sky with the white clouds of the overshooting tops and just, massive stuff. And I was like, this is crazy. So I sat on our chicken coop watching this as it came over the hill. And the first thing I remember was, recall from that was I saw this stuff come and I thought it was raining, And then I was thinking, what the heck? Because all the trees were in blossom at the time, and they were just being stripped of everything as it's moving across the orchard. I was like, okay. So I got off the chicken coop. I closed the gate because you don't want the chickens to get out. And I ran up to the house. And by the time I got to the house, I was being pelted with small hailstones about the size of, they were about the size of quarters. But then I got into the house, and at that point, my mom's like, in the basement, warning, so we all went in the basement. We lived in an old farmhouse, and the hail just grew and grew, and it was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. I've never heard anything louder. I mean, I've been to tractor pulls. I mean, it was crazy. And it was just loud, and then it was over. It was over. And I'll be honest, I have never, in the 35 years I've been at, 36 years I've been in the Weather Service, in the 4 years, 4.5 in college, I have never seen a tornado. But I have seen some of the biggest, scariest, nastiest hail in my life. And that was one of those days we had some softball-sized hail, and it did unbelievable damage to our clapboard siding on our wood house. And it was just, I was just like, that is way, way cool, way cool. 12 years old. And my mom, sort of like what Barb was talking about, my mom was like, well, you want to be a meteorologist, you've got to start studying. I didn't even know how to spell it. I was like, okay, and this was
Still
before you had, there you go. Before you had computers, right?
Yeah.
So you had to go to the library. And when you went to the library, they said, well, we don't have that book. So you'd have to order it from the downtown branch. They would then ship it to the outer branches. Then you could pick it up, and you only had it for 5 days. And you had to get it back. So that was what I did. I started, my mom was so great. My dad and mom, just great. Hey, let's get him books. And so I had books, and sort of like, man, I like that background there with all those books. That's kind of what my other part of my house looks like, with all those books piled up there. I was like, man, books, read. I said, I want to go to college. So when I went through high school, got everything done, getting ready to go to college, I had to be a meteorologist. Probably another story here, but that was the one that just really got me going. April 3rd, 1974, 12 years old. I wanted to know why the hail got that big. I ended up going to the University of Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma, because I wanted to learn about severe weather, and I have never seen a tornado. So there's my story. There's more to the story. Wait,
well,
I'll tell you more later.
We want more. That's right. These Ektachrome slides, James, right here, are from JB's collection.
Wow.
And I've got a box of them back here, and these are from Guin, Alabama, from the night of from his damage surveys after April 3rd, 1974. And I'm going to be scanning them in over the next few days and putting them up on our site and giving them to Jen for for her Tornado Talk website. The chipmunks over there are waiting, dying for those images to come. And
it was crazy, at 12 years old, and my parents were so good. I think about what it takes to be a meteorologist, and you have to have a good mentor. You have to have a good leader. My parents were excellent. They were good teachers. My mom was a teacher. They were good teachers. They said, you need to learn. Here's the books. We'll get you the books. You got to do the work, but we'll give you the books. We'll get you the books. And they went out of their way to get books. I just can't say enough. Good teachers, good mentors. You got to listen to them.
Yeah.
Good support. I had the same thing. Great support from home. I started staying up through the night to watch hurricanes make landfall in middle school. I think I stayed up through Hugo, and that was
where did you live, Barb?
Michigan.
Wow.
But it was fascinating. I used to get out the paper map and plot the tracking points, and I'd watch them all night when they made landfall. And I mean, my parents let me.
For me, it was AM weather. Remember AM weather on PBS?
Oh man, I got up every morning to plot.
They've been on this show. We had them on this show.
Yeah,
it was like I was fanboying out. I was geeking out on this.
I would have been there, man. I would have been
it was like Joan Van On, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I know Gary Petty had something to do with it for a while, but who was the other guy? Bill with Joan. I can't. Anyway, if you search the WeatherBrains archive, you'll find the show where we had the AM weather crew on here.
I may have to do that.
We were about to pass out. We were so excited.
It was so hard to come by. You had the TV news, but that was just like, that was a weather geeks. You think about the internet now, man. You can find anything you want, but boy, that was it. And you had to get up in the morning. You had to be intentional. And my parents were good. They said, okay, you can do that. And I don't know. It was just cool.
It was Carl Weiss.
Yeah, we had Carl Weiss and Steve Zubrick joined us because he was that night, and Joan Von Ahn, of course. But
fantastic stuff.
I got up every morning, before school, and had my little mimeograph set of maps that I could trace the maps onto my paper.
Yeah.
Because it was, but that night, that April 3rd, 1974 was the last night, for more boring personal stories, that I was ever scared of the weather. Because living in Birmingham, of course, Alabama was affected by the southern end of the outbreak. And like you said, Michael, everything, back then we had no NOAA weather radio. We were only working with, commercial radio and television stations information. And, I was really adept at it because I was like Barb. I was petrified of the weather.
Yeah.
And I will never forget seeing the Skywarn map that day on the Today Show. That was my routine, AM weather, the Today Show, to see the Skywarn map. And I freaked out when I saw this, this weather map. And so, at recess, the teacher said, let's all go outside and we'll work outside today. Because it was, like you said, Michael, a beautiful windy day. And while they were all playing, on the playground, I was positioned on the highest point, looking to the southwest. My teacher came over. Her name was Linda Jemison, and she came over and she said, "Bill," she goes, "Why aren't you playing?" I said, "Because this is going to be a terrible day." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We're going to have terrible tornadoes tonight." And she said, "This kid's weird." And so she went off doing her thing. The next day, she was like, "You saw those tornadoes?" And I was like, "No, the Today Show told me they were coming." And but that morning when I woke up and I was still alive, because I went to sleep thinking this is it, it's over with. And when I woke up, I no longer feared the weather after that night. It was the last night. So
yeah, I didn't fear it. I didn't really fear weather. I just I got a greater appreciation for it. I think that was I
petrified of it.
Yeah.
So,
what I'm going to do before I die and before we stop doing this show, I will tell what I saw that night. I've never talked about it in public.
Tell the details, right?
No, I've never talked about it publicly or privately. My wife, nobody.
But you were in a hospital in Jasper that night doing amateur radio, right?
The People's Hospital. And I saw things a 17-year-old should not see. And I think it would be good therapy for me to talk about that at some point, but I'm not ready to do that yet. But before if I die, remind me, Bill, to talk about it before I go down to the funeral parlor.
I will remind you.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's don't let that happen. Let's do not let that happen.
All right.
Get a few more of these shows in, man.
We got a lot of work to do here,
show, man.
Never. We'll be like 90. Hello, WeatherBrains time.
So now, James, you're talking about this hard out. This hard out is inconvenient when we have great guests like this. This is just not.
Yeah, I know it's a bummer. I mean, most weeks when I'm in Studio A at the other place, we could talk all night. But the problem is that this equipment has to be used to get me on television at 10 o'clock Central. So I have to kind of peel away to do that. Sorry.
But Troy's a big fan.
Maybe the world will get back.
I like the hard out about 9:45.
So now, Barb, you
go for it, books. James. Go for it.
You get these Wilder books, and you find that sixth book of the series, The Long Winter. Did it affect you then, meteorologically, or did it come much later?
I came of age reading about the weather and reading about Laura Ingalls Wilder at the same time. So to me, I think they were always intertwined. I was always drawn to the book, The Long Winter, more than the others in the series, except maybe These Happy Golden Years, because there's a tornado. And I did always have that question in my mind about, okay, this is her story and this is how she's telling it, and how real is it? And how much does she remember? Even, from a fairly young age, I knew that she had written the books as a fairly well, she wrote them in her 60s. You know, there were several decades past when these events happened. And she didn't have computers to look things up. So how much could she really remember of these specific weather events that she talked about? So I think I always had that curiosity. And some people have comfort foods. I have comfort foods. And some people have comfort books. And to me, the Laura Ingalls Wilder books were comfort books. You know, they're easy to read because they are written for children or young adults. So when I needed to kind of just process something, I'd read one of her books. And so I read them well into adulthood. And even in adulthood, I would read them and think, oh, I wonder if that event happened like she described it. And at some point, it dawned on me that I was a meteorologist and I had the tools to look it up if I really wanted to know, which is when I started going down the path of actually researching the weather in her books.
So for anybody in the audience who maybe isn't familiar with the series, give us the background on it.
Sure. So Laura Ingalls Wilder is an American author, and she wrote historical fiction books, the Little House books, they're often called, based on her childhood. There was a very popular TV series, Little House on the Prairie, that was very loosely based on the books. The books were, in turn, fictionalized accounts of her childhood, meaning some of the things really did happen as she described them. Other things didn't. There's a mix of fiction and nonfiction in the books. So there's an entire group of scholars who have spent their careers trying to parse out fiction and reality in her books. And they've approached it from many angles, everything from woodworking to music to, in my case, the meteorology.
So
when you
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, Mike, that's your job. You were sworn to do this.
Well, I'm really kind of interested in this. So what have you found meteorologically? Have you been able to validate any of these stories? And if so, what? Yeah. So what are you finding?
So I started with The Long Winter because that book is all about weather. Like, weather is a central antagonistic character in that book. So there's a lot of focus on the weather that happens during the Long Winter. Now, the Long Winter, it is well documented that it was based on the winter of 1880 to 1881. And at that time, she was living in De Smet, what at the time was Dakota Territory, is now South Dakota. It's about halfway between Brookings and Huron, if you're not too familiar with the area. And so when I started to parse through that book, you know, my first questions were, what data do we even have to verify or not verify what's in her book? And so it first required me going back to dig into the data records to see what was there. And, you know, there are some long-term observation sites kind of in the region, Omaha, Des Moines, Minneapolis, St. Paul, but that's not terribly close. I wanted to get closer. There's a long-term site in Huron, which is only like 40 miles away, but they didn't start observations until the summer after the Long Winter. So
it takes a major event to actually make things happen.
Right. So close, so far. But there were military forts taking observations, and about a decade or so ago, there was a program called the Climate Database Modernization Program, and it was led by some state and regional climatologists, particularly at the Midwestern Regional Climate Center, where they captured these records and digitized them so that the data could be made available to researchers. So there are a number of military forts from the, let's say, mid to late 19th century scattered around the United States where there are weather records. And so I did stumble upon several of those in South Dakota. So that let me get a little bit of a closer look too. So that answered one question, are there data? But other questions follow. How well do the data compare with her observations? And then, you know, she calls this, you know, this terrible, severe winter. And if that's the case, was it severe, or was it her perception and imagination? Was it really, really meteorologically significant, or was it made worse because her family was poor and cold and hungry that winter? So I got to dig.
I'm just going to say it's a perception issue too. You know, when you talk to older folks, you know, this is the worst winter. I talked to my mom and she's like, "Oh, it's so bad. The winter was so bad." Well, part of it is she's so frail that it is really hard to get around, and it's really kind of like it doesn't verify with the data It doesn't, but she experiences it differently now at 86 years old than when she was 6. So yeah, interesting. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
That's okay, because there's a whole tangent I could take on that, and maybe I'll get there in our conversation. But to go through the process here, first I looked and there were records. Now I can compare them to how she described events. And she starts off pretty early in that book with an October blizzard. And in her manuscript, her pre-publication draft of that book, she actually gave a specific date of that blizzard, October 15th. And boy, I'll be darned if she wasn't correct, that there was a blizzard that was documented and documentable. You could pull it out of news stories, you could pull it out of other accounts of that winter, some journals, and you could pull it out of the weather maps. If you pull down the NOAA library weather maps, there it is, a big low pressure system sitting in the middle of the country, and South Dakota is there on the northwestern flank of it with a compact pressure gradient, and observation sites are reporting visibility obscured and 30, 31, 32 degrees. So, that was like my first real dive into the meteorology, and she nailed it. She had it right on. So then it got really exciting as I started to pick through the book further. She goes in the early part of the book, the first half or so, she goes event by event and describes things as they happen. And I can go into the weather records, and they didn't exactly happen on the timeline she indicated always, but it was always really close. She described a schoolhouse blizzard that was probably sometime around early December or so. And in that blizzard, she's at school with her sister and all the kids of town. A blizzard strikes, and a little bit reminiscent of a children's blizzard type of story. They have a hard time getting home. They do get home. Now, I didn't find newspaper records that say, yes, the kids got stuck at school and had a hard time getting home, but the weather records bear out. There was a day that was mild, then the temperatures crashed down. The observation sites show that steady decline of temperatures and precipitation beginning. So no reason to think it didn't happen.
So Barb, did she base this on her life? Was she there in 1880, 81 during that winter?
Yes, that's her in that place experiencing that winter. And to give a little more background, De Smet in 1880 was a brand new railroad town. It literally went up from nothing to a town in the summer of 1880. A lot of homesteaders around that area established their homesteads in 1879 to 1880, including her family. So that's a lot of newbies coming into the area, right? A lot of folks who haven't experienced even what you would call normal or average winter in the plains, let alone a harsh one.
And how
so
old,
they're already.
Barb, how old would she have been at that age, at that point?
She would have been 12, turning 13. She was born in 1867, in January of 1867.
Okay, go, Troy. I know you got a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask Barb, because now this is just really intrigued me, Barb. Where these digitized records, the military fort records, are they actually stored at NCEI, or are they somewhere else through the regional climate centers? Or
they're archived through the Midwestern Regional Climate Center, and they have an access page where you can see what's available and make requests for the data.
Hey, that's great.
Oh, it's fascinating stuff. And if you ever have a reason to want that deep historical look at some weather conditions, it's hit or miss. A lot of the observations have long gaps, or they were only in a place for a year or two. But when they have it, it's fascinating. Hey, here's a pop quiz question for all of you on the panel. On a military fort in the mid to late 1800s, what position of a soldier would have been the person taking the weather observations? Which position or job would it have been?
Sergeant.
Person.
I don't know.
Sounded good though, Michael. I'll just throw something out there. I don't know.
Although, hey, maybe here, I'm thinking. They had horses, right? Stable master, the stable master, or somebody in charge of stables.
That's
any other guesses before I give it away?
I'll say the medical officer.
Any other guesses before I give it away?
That didn't work. Come on, James. You're always good for a good guess.
I didn't say it did or didn't work for either of you. I'm just trying to get everybody to give an answer.
Troy?
No, I can't imagine, but I know Barb is going to be good. So
the cook.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Colonel Mustard.
Yeah.
Bill nailed it. It's got to be someone who knows how to take a temperature. So yes.
There you go.
Typically, the physician was the only
Really?
scientist on the base. So they
Wow.
charged that person with other scientific duties, including weather observations.
Well, there
Wow.
you go.
There you
There
go.
you go.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
So
I would never have made
I'm
it.
still, Bill, waiting for some degree. You just called James. You're always good for a guess, and you said that to James.
Well,
and, he's got the 10 o'clock coming up.
Exactly. That's what they called us. They called us weather guessers. James and I used to get to go in the Alabama broadcast booth for the football games and do the weather with Eli Gold, because he's had a terrible year this year, James. I didn't know he'd had both shoulders replaced. Did you know that?
I think he's been in pretty severe pain while working. Yeah.
And so, but I used to get to go up in the booth and do the weather, and he always introduced me as the weather guesser, and I always thought that was pretty funny. So there's some sort of tie there.
I've been called worse than that.
Yeah. Barb, you like football. What's your football team?
Well, I got to root for the Central Michigan University Chips because I went there for my undergrad. I grew up rooting for Michigan as well, but this year maybe not the year to talk about that. I have other teams I follow too. I follow the Hawkeyes mainly because it's in the family here. So
there you go. Mike, how about you? What's your team?
Honestly, it's terrible. I grew up in Cincinnati. You'd think Cincinnati Reds, the Bengals, all this, I honestly, I was so enamored with meteorology and weather. I was a geek. I did not follow any sports. I was a band geek. I was a theater geek. I was a music geek, and I was wanting to do weather. And that's all I could think about. Even as I got into my courtship years with my wife, I was just like, their sports just didn't do it for me. It was all about the science and the weather. And
you know this song means something to you. You know this song means something to you. Big song.
What was that? No, okay. I was in marching band in high school. I knew all the fight songs. I knew all the fight songs. I didn't know which schools they were for, but we had to play them all. So it's terrible. That's terrible. So I never really have followed sports. I know that sounds crazy, but I actually I sing a lot. I'm in theater. I have a banjo hanging up on the wall. I'm not going to play any licks. I have pretty bad arthritis, but I do love my bluegrass.
We might put you up to it before this is over with.
You don't want to do that, man. Your ratings are going to go through the basement.
There's only the five of us watching this show right now anyway, Michael. I hate to tell y'all, but anyway,
I periodically root for the Sooners just because that's where I went to school.
Yeah, the alma mater.
Yeah.
So Barb, I've seen where you said before that the weather for Wilder wasn't a background; it was an antagonist, and for a lot of us, from time to time, the weather becomes an antagonist, but it's not an antagonist day in, day out. Expand on that. What the weather meant to folks in that period.
Well, they were so highly vulnerable, and we're vulnerable too. I don't want to make it sound like back in the day they had all the vulnerability and we don't. They were vulnerable in different ways than we are. And one of the important ways they were vulnerable that perhaps we've gotten better at overcoming is in food supplies. So during the long winter, part of the suspense and buildup is that with that town being so new, they were very dependent on the trains coming in to bring food that winter. A lot of folks hadn't had time to put much in the ground to grow for the year. So, all right, we're going to get through this winter with buying stuff from the trains. We'll get things better established next year. Well, when snow after snow occurred in this area, this is a fairly rustic track cut across. Some of those cuts where they cut through the hills for the train to pass more level started to fill in with snow. And after a while, they couldn't keep that track clear. It just kept blowing shut over and over again. And at some point around late December to early January, depending where you were along those train lines, they stopped running the trains. And when they did that, they couldn't get food in anymore. So folks had to share. They had to use up seeds to eat instead of to put in the ground next spring. some communities pooled their resources together. You know, this family doesn't have very much. This one's got maybe a little more. Let's redivide and share things out. And they made do. The Ingalls family in the book, they famously lived on potatoes and bread through the winter. In reality, they may have had one or two other foods stored away, but it sure wasn't much more. So, you know, this is a family that's going nearly hungry through this winter. They're eating just enough to survive, but not enough to thrive. So they were highly vulnerable. Now, our vulnerability, I think, if I was going to pick away our society currently is most vulnerable, it's in traffic. Because when the storms hit, they pretty much hunkered down once the storms were hitting them in Laura's time and in Laura's books. You know, now we've got this mentality that we got to go no matter what. So people get out on the roads, put themselves in a vulnerable place. And sometimes that's where they are most impacted by winter. So when I say we're differently vulnerable, I think that's maybe the biggest difference.
Well, do you think also the vulnerability back then was you didn't know? I mean, we have forecasts now. I mean, think about the forecasts. Just 35 years when I started in the agency, you know, we were lucky if we got a 3-day forecast pretty decent, you know, and you were throwing darts at a wall beyond 7 days. But now, I mean, you know, you can go weeks and it's like, hey, something's coming. It's going to be a pattern change. You don't know exactly, but, you know, there's more awareness, I think.
Oh, absolutely. You know, a forecast in Laura's book is looking out at the sky to the northwest and seeing if a cloud is coming. And of course, we've got much more information now. Not only do we have information from forecasts, but we have our climatology. So we've got a range of what's happened in the past that at least can help guide our expectations a little. Things happen outside of our climatologies, but we at least have that range of possibilities so that we know what we're dealing with. And in Laura's time, the only people who really had that kind of knowledge were indigenous, and white people weren't really listening to the indigenous people at the time. So they didn't gain that knowledge and really have that understanding of how bad it could be.
And didn't she mention her father, someone picked up on cycles that the indigenous, the Native Americans told them about 7 years, and the third cycle would end with a really bad storm? Was that true, that was folklore of the time, and did it bear out in this storm?
You know, that is maybe one of the questions I get asked the most when I talk about this to the Laura Ingalls Wilder fans who have read the book and know that there's a scene in there where an old Native American man comes into town to warn the town that every 7th winter is supposed to be a hard winter, and every 3rd 7th winter is supposed to be especially hard. And he was warning them that this was a 3rd 7th winter, and they should expect an especially hard winter. I have never found anything that supports that a Native American came to town and said this, that there was a folklore of it. I can't find anything. I don't know where she got it. She had to have heard it from somewhere, right? Because that's really hard to invent. So I guess it probably was some kind of rumor that circulated at some point in her adulthood, even if it wasn't when she lived there.
It was social media. Social media. It's that face and FaceTube and all that stuff.
The tweeter.
What does occur to me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, what does occur to me is that the ENSO cycle is roughly 3 to 5 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. And South Dakota would be on the more impacted side of an ENSO cycle. So perhaps there was some sort of irregular cycle if this folklore was rooted there, to me, that's the only thing I can think of that may have been the source of it. But I've never found any other documentation. If somebody has it, please send it to me. I've never found any documentation about it.
Other elements of weather folklore entered into her knowledge of meteorology. You know, because I know that I've heard a story that her father pointed out that the muskrat den's wall was thicker than normal, and I did hear that story, and that meant a long winter was coming. Yes,
they looked to the natural world, like many folks did, for any information they could, and still do. So there's a long scene where Laura's father, Pa, comments on the thickness of the walls of the muskrat houses. And the thicker they are, the harder the winter is expected to be. And they were exceptionally thick. The birds flew south early.
The geese didn't even stop, right? They just kept right on flying.
They just kept right on flying. And they saw the October blizzard as a harbinger of a bad winter. Now, that one I can actually tell you from statistics is not necessarily true in that region, but they saw it as that and took it as a warning, shot across the bow.
And what were some other ways that their family adjusted to weather? Because you mentioned their vulnerabilities. What are some other ways that they adjusted?
Prior to and up to the October blizzard, they were living on their homestead, which really just had a shanty built on it, just a small light structure for some cover. When the October blizzard hit, they realized that structure wasn't substantial enough to get them through the winter. So they moved into their town building in the town of Desmet and lived in there for the winter. They didn't have much to bring in as far as food stores, and they actually didn't move all of their livestock feed. They left that out on the homestead. So that put Pa in the vulnerable position of needing to go get feed and bring it back in between blizzards and hope to not get caught again.
It's interesting because I used to work in Nebraska, and there's a museum out there, Harold Warp Museum, and it's really interesting because they have Harold Warp's story is very similar. His family settled out there. They were one of the first pioneers families to settle, and they had talked about the soddies that they were setting up and having to live with the livestock to survive some of the winters. And I did some cursory digging when I first moved out there. Is this true? I mean, come on, is this some? Because it was just wacky for me. I'm a Ohio boy. I mean, this is not. It was amazing what they had to go through to survive.
They also had to burn hay. So those same trains that were supposed to bring in all the food were also supposed to bring in all the fuel. I don't know if you all have been to South Dakota, but other than the shelter belts that got planted around the 1930s, there aren't a lot of native trees. So it's not like you can go cut down wood to burn in your own home. Some folks had some sod cut, but again, if you didn't get that in before the really nasty stuff hit, that ground was frozen. You couldn't bring up peat and sod to burn. Like, there really was nothing to burn, but there's grass everywhere. So, and hay, which was supposed to feed the livestock. So folks twisted the hay up into sticks to kind of toughen it and harden it and make it burn just a little slower, and put that in their wood stoves and use that for a little bit of heat. And it basically probably brought room temperature from below freezing to near or slightly above. And that's how folks lived through that whole winter.
So now, Barb, you mentioned there's been a huge response to your presentations. How has this helped you communicate weather and climate to different audiences?
What I learned most of all, and wrapped up in the research that I've been doing all along with these weather and climate stories in Laura's books, is that, I could walk into a room and start listing off facts about severe winters and put a list out there of the winters that have been ranked as the most severe. And nobody in the room is going to remember what I say when I leave. But when you can attach it to a story, especially something that's really well known, like Laura Ingalls Wilder's stories, people remember that. And it drives curiosity and interest and helps people remember the information. So I can create this narrative around her narratives and basically stand on her shoulders to help communicate to folks who otherwise maybe weren't all that ingrained in weather and climate about these different phenomena. How else am I going to get a group of librarians and teachers and writers to be really, really interested in what the Chinook is?
So that
is, and I'll be honest, I started out in the weather service, and when I first started in LA, I went to school in Oklahoma, and I was severe weather, right? I went to LA, Los Angeles, severe weather capital of the world. Anyway,
yeah.
But it was interesting because, you have to, when you move to a new location as a meteorologist, you have to learn what that weather is. And the only way you can learn is from hearing the stories of the people that have been there, the seasoned, grizzled, old forecasters that are sitting there at the time smoking. You could smoke in the office, they were sitting behind the radar and they knew how to work that. But it's the same thing you're saying, Barb. It's that story. Their stories made me understand how that weather worked in LA. I couldn't have done it if I had to show up there and do it without any kind of mentorship or any kind of leadership. And the stories make a difference. That's just cool. I did not know this about you, Barb. I did not know this about you. So,
Well, and speaking to you as a WCM, you go out and do this for a living. How do you talk to people when you're doing spotter talks? You don't just list off facts about a storm. You tell some kind of story to engage them. The broadcasters, you understand this because you go on the air and tell stories every day. Some of us nerds took a little more time to learn about this, and learning the art of storytelling is something that doesn't come naturally to everybody.
that's why you're a doctor, okay? And I mean that with great respect, because I am not. I didn't push that button too far.
I'm just super grateful that the folks at University of Nebraska's School of Natural Resources let me do this for my PhD research, because all of this that I'm talking about, it was the foundation of my dissertation.
That's really cool. Now, are you writing a book about it, Barb, eventually, or are you doing that now?
I am writing a book about it now. I was really headstrong into it, and then the pandemic hit, and my 5-year-old was home with me for all day, all the time, and that's not a conducive writing environment. So trying to restore some normalcy here, and I think we're getting back into the saddle again. So hopefully I can continue to push through that. I'm probably a third or so of the way of getting words on the page. And then I'll need to pitch it.
Patience, and fine. It's all good.
I'll need to pitch it and find a publisher and all of those things that come along with a book. Just writing it is only the first step, but we are in progress.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah, we can't wait for that. I remember reading about your writer's retreat. You took the Amtrak.
I did.
Being an Amtrak
back
fan,
when we could do that.
That when was that? Last October? Just seems like that was a millennia ago.
It was. It feels like a whole lifetime ago, but it was last October. This beautiful time of year to hop on the train and go spend a night away somewhere. That's another reason this pandemic hurt my writing. I couldn't go retreat.
Yeah. And so you mentioned this huge winter, 80, 81, and this tremendous amount of snow. And we know there was tremendous flooding in the wake of it. Did Wilder pick up on that in her writing?
She only very tangentially mentioned it. So let's talk about how this winter ended first, because I've kind of hinted at it with the Chinook too. And this bears out again in the data that I found, that how Laura described this part was very accurate. She talks about waking up in the middle of the night and she hears the wind, but it sounds different. And she hears water dripping and she jumps up in the middle of the night, Papa, the Chinook is here. And he's like, yeah, Laura, I hear it, go back to sleep. And the next morning he's like, yeah, you woke us up to tell us the wind is blowing, like you haven't heard it blowing all winter. And she said, I said the Chinook. That makes all the difference. Because they knew the Chinook back then was that warming snow eater wind that comes down off the Rockies and, melts away the snow rapidly. So bearing out in the data, when I looked through the data, it was like a switch flipped. Up until mid-April, it was, even in March to early April, maybe it would poke above freezing during the day, a day or two, and then right back down again below freezing, more snow. Maybe it poked up for a day and then back down below freezing for a week, right? And on April 15th, that's it. The temperature stayed above freezing and it never went below freezing during the day again. And by April, I think it was April 22nd, it never went below freezing at night either. So just like a switch, like it went over rapidly to some different pattern. And when you take what is almost certainly a record snowpack in that region, basically across the entire upper Midwest to the northern and central plains over to the northern Rockies, and you abruptly melt it, you can bet there was a lot of flooding, and it came in 2 waves. So the first wave was that initial runoff going into the rivers, and these rivers are, some of the thickest ice they've probably ever had. Bumps that ice up, shoves it downstream, and you have ice jams. It's ice jam flooding that took out half the town of Vermillion, South Dakota that spring, for example. Took out some other towns that never came back. And then the second round of flooding came as all that snow melted away all upstream, and it was in every tributary of the Mississippi and Missouri in the northern half of the United States. Everything was flooded and everything was backlogged because the main stem was flooded, and that flooding stuck around all through the summer. These trains that had been waiting for the thaw so that the snow would melt and they could get through, in some cases, maybe one train got through and then the bridges washed out from this flooding and the trains were stopped again. So it compounded the issues that had started that winter. Laura only mentioned muddy roads, and it was still too difficult to get things in by wagon. So they were still waiting for the train. That's all she really mentioned of it. They weren't very close to a river where she lived. So I imagine it would have been hard to visualize some kind of direct impact for her, but she did at least acknowledge that it was wet and that things weren't able to transport.
So now you've gone back and done some reanalysis, right, of that winter and the event. Talk about that for a minute. How much can you learn meteorologically about what happened?
So I've used the NOAA has a great lab out in Boulder, and they keep reanalysis data, and they've updated their 20th century. It's labeled the 20th century reanalysis, but it goes back into the 19th century. And every time they release a new version, it goes farther and farther back. So you actually can get a reanalysis back to, I think it's 1830 something now, but certainly back to 1880 to 1881. And the resolution of this data has been improving. It's largely based on some surface pressure data and ship observations. So it's not perfect. It can be flawed, but for what they have, the output they have produced is solid. One thing we know about that winter is that it had a very strong NAO, North Atlantic Oscillation signal through the winter. And that is associated strongly with colder winters in at least the eastern 2/3 of the country, and in some cases, the whole country. There also was a weak El Nino that year, which is an interesting flip in my mind, because when you think of what patterns may cause harder winters in the northern plains, you think of La Nina over El Nino. But we did a little bit of sketching around, and the combination of a negative NAO and El Nino seems to feed some of the most severe winters that have occurred in this century.
A lot of it is also that. It's also that weak El Nino that you mentioned too.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a really not a real clear signal. You know, but that those weak El Ninos and even weak La Nina, it's that weird break that's occurring in that pattern. Yeah, that's interesting.
My pet theory is that the weak El Nino contributed moisture to the pattern, and then the very strongly negative North Atlantic Oscillation contributed that cold air. And it was it's just the combination is somehow ripe for it being tied to some of the most severe winters we've had. Here's another good one that it compares to.
This is geeky stuff. This is geeky stuff. This is like WeatherBrains stuff.
Yeah, man. That's why we're here.
Some folks might remember the winter of 2009 to 10, and especially in the north central United States, that also was one of the more severe winters we had, right up until about February, and then it got mild again. But from October through January, for sure, that was a very severe winter. And that too was a very similar pattern: strongly negative North Atlantic Oscillation, weak El Nino. But Barb, it's also got a lot of climate change attached. So the baseline was raising, so it ended up not being quite as severe.
So Barb, you have this is awesome stuff. You have your accumulated winter season severity index. Did you apply that to that season? How would it turn out?
Yes. So the accumulated winter season severity index, or AUSSI, we call it, was bred to help us study this winter, because I needed a way. I wanted to compare this winter to others to say, was it as severe? Was it the most severe? And how do you classify severity? How do you judge the severity? You know, you can't use just temperatures, because a dry severe isn't the same as a wet severe. You can't use just snow, because a mild severe is different from a cold severe. So we created this index that included both temperature and snowfall data. And basically every day, for the sports folks on this, every day gets a point total. And through the whole season, you accumulate those points every day. By the end of the season, you end up with a certain number of points. And at every site we use this calculation at, we go through and calculate a climatology of it, so you can find the percentiles. So we then use those percentiles as categories from mild, moderate, near average, severe, and extreme. And we did use this to go back and calculate this winter. Now, there weren't snow data in 1880 and 1881, even for the sites that were recording weather. So we had to also go through and create a calculated version that approximated snowfall based on temperature and precipitation data, which is itself a whole different thing. We used an empirical study to guide our calculations and did a little massaging and made a system that actually worked. The correlation was about 93% for most sites, so that's not too bad. Anyway, we found that the winter of 1880 to 1881 was among the most severe since white people moved into the area and started keeping records. Now we can't go back into winters before the instrument records started, at least not directly. There are counting calendars, but they can only gauge memorable winters, not how severe they were. But we can use the Aussie to rank those winters. And I said this kind of carefully, it was among the most severe in that region. But it wasn't the most severe everywhere. It was the most severe in Omaha. It was the most severe in Montana. But it wasn't the most severe at Minneapolis, St. Paul. So somewhere in between, there's a gradient of which winter was the most severe. And the other one that kind of borders the area that shows up as being the most severe is the winter of 1874 to 1875, which really starts to strike me as interesting because Laura lived through that winter too in Minnesota, where it was the most severe on record. So at the very least, she lived through these two winters that are comparable in their intensity. But the winter of 1874 to 75 barely gets a mention. And the long winter gets a whole book. So that's where I come back.
Is it because, okay, I don't know. This is me. I don't know what I'm talking about. Is it because she had access to, in Minneapolis, more infrastructure, more stability versus in the plains where they were starting out with scrapping off scraping and scrapping? I mean, is that?
Yes, I think that's at the root of it. So when they were in Minnesota, they were in Walnut Grove, which is in the southwest part of the state. Not a big city by any means, but it was in and near a town that was a little more established, had been there longer. They were not well off, but they were a little more financially secure than they were when they got to the Smet. So I do think part of it is that it just impacted her differently. Like they weren't near starving and they weren't running out of fuel.
So certainly living on a different edge. They were living in a different edge. I'm sure that it wasn't pleasant, but when you're dealing with, as you said, you're famished, you have nothing, you're scraping and scrapping at the bottom of your bread barrel, basically to survive. Certainly is going to be memorable. I was 12 years old. Okay. You were scared of weather at 4. Those are memorable and they imprint in your brain. When you are in a moment of stress and anxiety. I'm sure that was a huge player.
Yeah, to the point of there probably being some post-event trauma for her, like there can be with folks who live through significant tornadoes or significant hurricanes or floods or other events that really strike them personally.
The floods of '93 when I was in Iowa, oh my gosh, I never want to see that much water ever. And I was an adult. I never want to see that much water. And I just can't. Every time it rains here now, I just know my sump pump's going to quit. I know it's going to quit, and I just become obsessive about it. So, it even affects us as adults.
Yeah, we had the folks on last week from Iowa talking about the derecho. I think folks in Cedar Rapids and a lot of communities there are going to be affected by that for many, many years. The first mention of severe weather, they're going to want to know, is it a derecho? Because they're no strangers to them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same here. When you talk about that, 2012, when we had the derecho come through here, it's every time you mention it and it creates unbelievable angst. So I could just imagine, it's similar to what Barb's talking about.
So Barb, you had a poster at NWA this year about an early, if not the first tornado photograph, and it may have had a tie to Ingalls, right? Talk about that.
Yeah. So, how many people have seen the picture from South Dakota of what sometimes was called the first tornado surviving photograph? It's actually the second that we know of. Has the main funnel in the middle, 2 funnels off to each side. Lots of debate about if it's real, if it's retouched, and how it was taken and such. And back in the 80s, John Snow wrote a paper about that photograph as well. And he actually did a pretty deep dive into its roots and its verification that it is a real photo, that it was taken by this photographer in this location. And the location was Howard, South Dakota, August 28th, 1884. So if we backtrack to me saying, I like these happy golden years because it has a tornado in it. Laura Ingalls Wilder, well, Laura Ingalls at the time is out riding in the buggy with her beau, Almanzo Wilder. And it's hot and it's puffy wind and she's seeing clouds go up. She doesn't like it. It doesn't feel right. She's watching towers develop. She doesn't say that, of course, but I know what she's talking about. You know, she's watching towers go up. She's watching one become dominant and the others around it go away. And then she watches this one, you know, the coloring of it change as it grows. And from the distance where she's riding in a buggy ride, as they're turning around now to go back to home, she watches this thing spin and put down a funnel, a tornado. And then she says, and another, and a third. And all three intermittently touch the ground, you know, like a cat's paw. It's coming from northwest to southeast. She's going from southwest to northeast, trying to get out of its path. They're not in the path. They get out safely, get back to her homestead. But they hear that the tornado has done damage. And in the book, she tells a story that Pa and Almanzo went back out to see if people needed help and encountered a homestead where two boys had left home on donkeys to do yard or farm work. They tried to get back to the house before the tornado hit. They weren't successful. One of the boys survived, the other one and the donkey died in this tornado. And the homestead was destroyed. So yeah, I went digging, and that three funnel thing that she described so matched the three funnel picture. And if you go into Grazoulis's Significant Tornadoes book, there's a third source that shows the three funnels are shaped a little differently than that photograph, but still that three funnel characteristic, very unique, but like a fingerprint of that event. And if you look at where she lived in De Smet, assuming she took a buggy ride, I don't know, 5 to 10, probably 10 miles south, and then looped back to home, that puts her about 10 to 20 miles from the location of that tornado where the photographer took that picture at the time and date when the tornado occurred. So not only did Laura Ingalls Wilder experience that tornado outbreak, there were other tornadoes that day. She experienced that tornado. She very likely, I'd say 99% certainty, saw that tornado that's in the picture.
Wow.
And when I put those things together, I've been seeing that picture since first grade, and I've been, you know, hearing Laura's story since I got to that book in like first or second grade. I jumped up and danced because that was so exciting to put those together and see the fireworks happen. She got one detail slightly wrong. It wasn't that tornado that did the damage she described and the fatalities she described. It was another one in the outbreak. It would have been too far for Pa and Almanzo to go and help, so they probably just heard the story. But the story as she described it is exactly how it's described in Grazoulis's book. So,
and I'm sure that she was, you know, you take whatever resources you can find, newspapers and everything else. Mm-hmm. I hear stories from my grandmother, and my mom tells these stories, you know, that they would devour whatever news they could find in the Depression, and, you know, being a Slovenian, you know, first here in America, and, you know, grabbing whatever news they could find.
Yep.
You grabbed whatever news you could find, and I'm sure it was no different there, you know.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the same newspaper account that Laura read back in the day that gave that description is probably what found its way as a source into Grazoulis's documentation later.
Yeah, pretty amazing stuff.
I just hate that Aubrey wasn't here to hear all this tonight, James, because she's a huge fan of weather history, was really excited about you being on, Barb, and also she read all the Ingalls books, she said, when she was a kid.
Well, I'm sorry I missed her. Maybe we'll have to talk to her again sometime.
We'll have you back as a panelist, and we'll see keep up with Michael. So far, Michael's our best panelist in history, I think, Troy.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to read those.
Double his pay. Double his pay.
I have to read those books. You know, I think I gave those to my daughter at some point in time. I don't know that I ever read them. I read a lot of the books we gave her, but I don't know that I read those. Now you got me. I'm going to have to do some more COVID reading here.
Well, James, it looks to me. I'm sorry, Barb, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, even if you had read them as a kid, reading them again as an adult, you see them very differently.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
you see Pa and Ma's perspectives a lot differently. You also will see things that haven't aged as well in our current era. So you have to get ready to kind of get uncomfortable too.
You know, there's a lot of that going on.
on Amazon tonight for Laura Ingalls Wilder books. That's for
Good.
sure. So today's the end of the hurricane season. It's been a crazy hurricane season, as you would expect in 2020. But I noticed you were mentioning, Barb, we need to do away with these quasi-arbitrary seasons. And there's
You read my Twitter. I've
been following your Twitter closely this year. It's full of good stuff.
You know, we don't take tornado season and try to define it by any month ranges. We don't do it with floods. We don't even do it with blizzards, and blizzards really are pretty seasonal. You know, I've always wondered why we do it with hurricanes when, you know, they don't wait for June 1st before they start, and they don't stop just because it's November 30th. You know, there have been plenty of documented cases now of hurricanes outside of hurricane season. So I've just always wondered why we hold on to it. And I think we're doing a good job as communicators to say, well, this is the season, but things can still happen. It just, you know, it'd be nice to get rid of the buts.
It's interesting when you talk about that too, Barb, because that's what, you know, as I'm on my downward trend out of the agency. I will be retiring, not soon, but, you know, I'm looking at that door. And it's interesting because I've been working with our staff here to try to think about, and it's been brought up to me, you know, that when we do spotter training, we traditionally do it in the spring, and we've kind of moved that differently this year. We're looking at doing winter and severe training in the fall because that's our secondary peak. And actually our strongest tornadoes historically have occurred in that October through December. And people don't think about it because we've been kind of grooming them that it's a spring thing. It's not, it doesn't occur, but in spring. And so that's been one of the real challenges, is breaking that mold that, that there is there is no season for weather. It can occur. Winter is a little different, but, you know, if you get warmer, and we've seen some winters where we haven't had much snow, but we've had severe weather. So, you know, I'm all for that. I'm all for that idea of awareness training year round, and on time. Anymore now, it's got to be on time and on demand.
Bill, you know, my new campaign down here, I'm trying to redefine tornado season in Dixie Alley. Traditionally, you know, it's the same problem we're talking about here. You know, traditionally, everybody says, well, we have a peak in late fall, November and early December, and a peak in spring, March, April, May. So it's like that's the only time you can have tornadoes. No, that's not true. If you look at the tornado occurrences, we have a pile of these things in January and February. I mean, this is kind of routine here. Why is this not a tornado season? So I tell people all the time, really, it's, you know, January through December. But if you want to look at it based on the numbers, it's November through May. We have one season, November through May, one season. So
oh man, we got James going. We got James going.
Yeah.
Fired up.
Yeah. My underwear is flapping up and down my legs. Yes.
I mean, if you want to talk severe weather climatology, that's near and dear to my heart, and getting closer to my job description too while we're at it. So
yeah, that was going to ask you. What is your day job, Barb? What do you get to do for your day job?
I have a fantastic day job. So I work for the National Weather Service, and my job is in our Warning Decision Training Division. That's one of 5 training divisions in the Weather Service. And we focus on training our meteorologists to issue quality severe thunderstorm, tornado, flash flood, and winter weather warnings. We get the fun stuff, right?
Troy, come on. I want Troy to jump into this. Come on, Troy, come on.
No, I don't think, and Barb and I have had the chance to talk. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Barb, and been up to the weather test bed and been up with the amazing people that are up there. I just think maybe, but see what Barb is telling us is, I just think there are too many warnings out there right now. But what Barb is telling us is she's telling us she's helping to make those where there's a little more critical thought going into them. So I think, you know, And that's what you always do. And it's the same thing with
Yeah.
Tim and other folks, and even Michael. I mean, in the office, like I've always said, I always qualify this. We have a great number of men and women in the National Weather Service that do an amazing job every day. And, no one's perfect. James is not perfect. Troy's not perfect. Bill's not perfect. And there's no perfect person in the Weather Service either. And all I'm saying is I really have a tremendous amount of respect for what Barb and Kim and all the folks down in Norman do, because I think they help us look at this more critically.
The word that I try to emphasize in our training is to be intentional with your warnings, that whatever you're doing, make sure you're doing it with thought. If you put a county in or leave a county out, make sure you meant to do it. If you put it is moving at 60 miles an hour, make sure that's what you meant it to do.
Yeah.
Draw your polygons to encompass the severe weather threats, but only the severe weather threats, not the entirety of the green bubble surrounding it. We're trying to work some of these refinements into our process. We're pretty good at it, really, as an agency, but you can always improve, and you can always find ways to get better at what we do and better communicate the threats and better identify the threats, identify them in a more timely way. So, these are the facets we're working through. My particular role in the Warning Decision Training Division right now is leading our severe weather training. So I blew it up this year. My team blew it up. We took everything we had, we scrapped it, and we rebuilt it. It's going to release in January. And while it's intended for National Weather Service meteorologists, it's available on the web. Anything that's recorded as a module is on the web for anybody to take and to get a feel for the directions we're going, what we're trying to get our folks to identify and work with, and the new technologies and the new science that we're trying to incorporate into our warning processes.
And that's going to be my pick of the week this week, Barb, because I saw that in your Twitter feed somewhere along the way this year. So,
but let me say this. I agree with Troy. I think the Weather Service does an amazing job. I mean, amazing job. Mike, you do an amazing job.
It's an amazing job to have. I will tell you, 36 years, it has been a stinking amazing job. The evolution of this agency, I know that it doesn't happen fast, but man, you think back 10 years. Barb, think about what it was like in the Weather Service 10 years ago and look at where we are now. Oh my gosh, we have unbelievable assets at our hands and unbelievably talented people that have gone through the training stuff. I just marvel. I'm an old dog, Michael, man. I'm an old dog.
The thing
you don't know old
that I wonder about is, Michael, when this word Skywarn first came about, which I'm assuming was in the 70s and 80s, I wonder how those people would look at. Let's just take 2020 out of here because the year sucks. But even 2019, look at how many advancements in Skywarn and what the Weather Service does. And I got to tell you something else, Michael, too. In this age, I'm one of those people, as Barb knows, because you're sitting in the middle of it. I like to have my people in front of me when you teach. And, Barb, we're not doing that anymore. I don't know how. I'm the kind of person to ask what Zoom was the week before spring break. I said, what is Zoom? I asked a TA that. And now my life is all about Zoom. But, Michael, the Weather Service and how they've turned around their training sessions online now.
Yeah.
That's all the WFOs around the country.
And think about this too, and I'm thinking about this, Laura Engel Wilder, what they had available. They had available was if the train came through and it had the newspaper and it was able to make it on time and you had all these things that piled up and prevented it. But now, click of a button, a drag of a mouse, you've got information. And then I'm thinking about, and James, you talk about this with the idea of the Weather Service. Think about all of the information we have available now. All of this information, it's unfathomable how we can process it all, but yet we're able to do it. And it all comes down to, you've got skilled people sitting at those desks that are trained to do what they're trained to do with excellent training from the training center down there. We're constantly learning and rethinking how we're going to do this. And it's just phenomenal technology. And then it gets back to this whole idea that we have people out there in Skywarn for a reason, because we are not in the field. We're trying to make warnings to save lives. We need to know what's going on, and we need people to tell us what's going on. And this is that whole idea. We just can't say, well, we're not going to do training. Good luck. Tell us what you want to tell us, but we're not going to tell you what it is we need. No, we're going to train you so that you can talk to us and tell us what's going on. You know, I just, it's a marvel. I marvel at where we are and the access that people have to us and that we have to people. It's an amazing, amazing time right now. Even in COVID, we're still able to function and serve our purpose and serve our mission and fulfill the mission. It's amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. I got passionate.
That's all right.
No, this is good. I'm about to tear up here.
We, we're working hard. You're right, Troy. We don't get to teach our in-person workshops to all the new meteorologists coming in this year. So we're working to adapt. The better part, like 120 hours of their training when they come in, is the distance component of the radar and applications course, right? That's the course that all new meteorologists take to learn how to issue warnings and interpret the radar. So almost around 120 hours of that, and it's supposed to culminate in a 40-hour in-person workshop. And we've got a year's worth of folks who can't get that last mile because COVID says we can't travel, we can't be in person together. So we're working on virtual things. We've accelerated technology development that we can offer these. At some point soon, we'll be offering these virtual workshops. It's not the same as in person, but it will allow us the ability to have our class working the same case in sync, and synchronized among all their different locations, logging into a remote AWIPS and issuing warnings from their PCs. And there's a lot of pieces that have to come together technologically and scientifically and workhorse-wise, even just to make this happen. And it's been amazing to watch the team at WDTV pull this together. And we're almost there. We're almost ready to put on these workshops for folks remotely. It will never replace in person.
You do what you have to do. You do what you have to do, right,
you
Barb?
adapt to what you you adapt to what you have and make it work. And I think this pandemic has taught a lot of us a lot about what we can do. I can do my job fully from home. So I do now. I'm a full-time remote worker now, permanently signed on the dotted line. There are a lot of folks who've learned that you can do mesoanalysis during a severe weather event from home and communicate it back to the office safely and effectively, or can do IDSS from home and communicate safely and effectively to partners. We're learning about these capabilities. And even when we're back, when we've all had vaccines and we're safe again and can be around people, some of these lessons are going to stick with us, that we can do things this way, and maybe in some ways it'll be better. So, I'm a person, Ma always said there's no great loss without some small gain. And, the COVID pandemic has been really hard, but some of these lessons will be those gains. Yeah.
I can't say enough about that too. I mean, we have had to adapt, and we have adapted. And that's, I think, a testament to the agency. It's not always been easy, but it's a necessity. It comes from necessity. The 88D, it was not easy. I remember that getting the new Doppler. Oh my gosh, it was such a shock to the system. But look at where we are now. AWIPS. When we got AWIPS, we went from AFOS to AWIPS. When we got the first PCs in the Weather Service, oh my gosh, we were going to tear the world apart. We were going to die. Nothing's, it's amazing. We make the necessary changes to fulfill the mission. And that's the testament to the Weather Service. Do we always get it right? No. We're educated weather guessers, but we have the best education that we can get. And that's a testament to the WDTB. It's a testament to all the folks that out there that do the training, because we couldn't do it without them. Honestly, I wouldn't be able to do the job I've been doing without that training, period.
So before we take a break, I got to ask, can you play that banjo?
You don't want me playing that banjo. I can't do my fingers anymore. I have enough arthritis in my hand right now. I can't curl it around the neck anymore. So
Okay.
But
Well, Bill Murray plays a wicked accordion, and Troy plays the tuba, and I play the French horn. I mean, Barb probably plays something here. We could make some wicked music here. So
I can
Run,
play
run,
harmonica.
Michael, run.
Downstairs.
It's not Wet Willie, but it'll pass.
yeah, we gotta take a break here for Jen, and this week in tornado history, we've got Tony. He's out with a stomach virus this week, so hope he gets back on track. But we're going to come back with picks of the week and much more, ladies and gentlemen, as WeatherBrains rolls along.
This week in tornado history, 13 tornadoes were recorded during the early morning hours of December 3rd, 1978. The strongest was an F4 tornado that developed at 1:50 in the morning Central Time in the Central Park area of Bossier City, Louisiana. In a summary from the National Weather Service Shreveport, this tornado was spawned from a supercell thunderstorm, which developed in deep East Texas ahead of a squall line. For Thomas Grisoulis and significant tornadoes, this twister developed near the point where an F2 tornado on April 17, 1978 ended. The Bossier City tornado moved to the northeast, crossing I-20 and affected businesses and homes along Benson Road and Airline Drive. It then moved into a sparsely populated area east of Airline Drive and north of US 80 and into the Meadowview area. The tornado destroyed parts of Meadowview Elementary School. Several 700-pound I-beam structures were carried several hundred feet and then firmly planted into the ground. On Ladon Drive, there were 2 fatalities. An automobile was tossed into a home, killing sisters Jana Lynn and Lisa Renee Currington, ages 8 and 13. They were sleeping. The National Guard Armory was destroyed, as well as the Northwest Louisiana State School. Home damage occurred in the Stockwell Place and Carriage Oaks area. The tornado lifted near Red Chute Bayou. Over $100 million in damage resulted from this event. Following the tornado, Ted Fujita with colleagues Robert Abbey and James McDonald surveyed the damage. Working with official in charge Ernest Etheridge of the National Weather Service, an extensive aerial and ground damage survey was completed. From Fujita's preliminary report after the survey, quote, "From a meteorological and engineering point of view, the Bossier City tornado has provided us with new knowledge on tornado winds. For example, the infrared temperature in the area of the parent cloud were not as significant as that of other clouds in the squall line." Get more details about this event, including more information from Fujita's preliminary reports, at our website, tornadotalk.com.
Thank you, Jim. Before we do picks, and by the way, Barb and Michael, we're going to ask you for a pick of the week, and that would be something related to weather. This can be a website or book, anything closely related to weather. So we're going to stall for a few minutes before we do that. Michael, talk about your office, Northern Indiana. I've been to Indianapolis and Chicago, but I have never been to your office. So explain who you are, why you're there, and what you do.
Explain to me why you didn't come in and see us.
Yeah, you never invited me. I mean, I've been invited to all the other offices up there, but yours. So
hey, the door is always, well, not always open. It had been up until recently.
But some creepers coming in there if you do that.
Yeah. No, actually, it's interesting. The office itself is located halfway between Fort Wayne and South Bend. So I can kind of give you an idea. And we're across the field from a cow field. So it's filled with cows. So that's kind of gives you an idea. Yeah, I'm telling you, they know when you're coming. As soon as you pull in, they let you know. And then across the way behind us is the Department of Natural Resources, and they have a lake back there and a wetland area. So we're kind of in the middle of God's country up here. It's flat, it's open, it's country. It's pretty rural. Like every other office, it's the same type of layout and everything. Office itself.
Talk about your CWA.
It's 37 counties, 5 counties in Michigan, 8 counties in Northwest Ohio, and the balance in Indiana. So we go from Lake Michigan down to Lima, Ohio, Hillsdale, Michigan, down to White County, or Monticello down in White County. Monticello was one of those towns hit by the April 3rd, 1974 tornadoes. So again, a very interesting time. And we have lake effect. We've got a lot of system snow, but the big thing around here is severe weather. We get a lot of wind, severe winds, and a lot of flooding. I would never have thought that there would have been as much flooding up here, but it's flat. It's amazing how long it takes for the rivers to evacuate up here. You get a lot of snow and rain, and those rivers will be in flood for a long time up here. Just pretty, it's nice. I'll tell you what, you're close to Chicago, you're close to Indy, you can get to Cleveland, you can go up into Detroit or Grand Rapids, and you have access to all these things. It's a nice little gem, little hidden in the woods up here. So if you ever
weather shakes and bakes up there. That's a great weather market. Troy, I'm trying to think how many TV markets intersect with this massive CWA here. I mean, there's got to be all kind. You got Chicago, and you got
Chicago,
goodness.
Fort Wayne, South Bend, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Lima, Ohio, Toledo. You've got Indianapolis, you've got Lafayette, and you've got Muncie, which is a part of Indy. It's crazy.
Wow.
It is crazy.
That's going to be a nightmare for WCM because you have to go see all these weather people and coordinate things. These wow.
You got to talk to them. You got to talk to people. That's crazy
Now,
stuff.
How is NWS chat in use there? Is that a useful tool for you guys?
Oh my gosh. I've been an advocate for NWS chat for a long time, but we started here. When I first got here, we had about 6 years, 7 years, 8 years ago. Oh man, it's almost 10 years now. We had an integrated warning team workshop, and we talked about NWS chat. And the group of people that were there, in emergency management, media, said we got to use this, and we use it religiously up here. It is the most. It's phenomenal. We have people coming in from all over. We get a lot of Weather Channel and everybody showing up in there. It is our backbone. It is our backbone. We've actually started including amateur radio in it as well, because it's just really important for us to keep them involved in that too. So so it's pretty neat. Yeah. It's pretty neat. It's great. Go ahead, James. I'm sorry.
Having the ham radio guys from the field in that chat session adds a whole new dimension that you would not have otherwise. And I think in most markets, they don't allow those guys on there. So I would love to have that here. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, we do that up here. I'll tell you, the other thing that we do is we make sure that they understand, they go through training and they're willing to be a representative. They're not going to be on amateur radio. They're going to be the liaison between the amateur radio operator and us, and allows them to work more closely with the people they know and keep us informed. And the media loves it. The media eat it up. I will tell you, it's phenomenal. It's another set of eyes. It's a virtual operational support team. And
do you have your ham license?
KG4 KJQ. I do.
Yeah, come on, baby. Whiskey Oscar 4 whiskey.
Oh man,
for weather. Yeah, baby. Come on now. Yep. I've had, this is embarrassing. I first got my ham radio license in 1970 when I was 14. I mean, that's how long I've been doing this. So that's awesome. Ham radio is always going to have a special place in my heart, because one day that EMP is going to hit and everybody's going to pick up their phones to get on the face tag and the tweeter. And guess what? Your phone's not going to work. We're going to save the world, the amateur radio operators. So I'm just saying, everybody's going to, they laugh at my dipole back here and my HF gear and all this stuff. You won't be laughing the day your cell phone stops working, and that's going to happen one day.
So you say that, it is funny because I've got mine. I got my little portable, and it's all I need. If all else fails, I can at least hit a repeater, and I can, if I need to, I can dial. It's, it's simple. It's simple, and the licensing is easy.
It's really not that hard. It's a lot. Back in my day, I had to drive to an FCC field office and take the exam in front of an FCC examiner. And now
with a ruler and a
right. All right, boys, shut up and take this test.
And use code. And you had to do CW.
Yeah, you did.
Oh man, listen, to get an advanced class license or an extra class license, it was 20 words per minute Morse code. 20 words per minute. And and I could do in fact, that's my second language is CW, continuous wave, Morse code. And I think we froze up Michael here. He's totally frozen. We froze the man.
We did.
But Barb, before we do picks of the week, we got to hurry real quick. When does Facets become operational? Tell us.
I don't have insider information
Oh,
on
yes,
that. I'll
you
be
do.
honest.
You know, you know.
I know it's not going to be in the next year or two because we're not developing training on making it operational yet. We're watching it like everybody else. We're trying to stay on top of the technology, so we're ready to create training for it when it gets rolled out. But I don't think it's imminent yet. We'll wait just a little longer. Let it be right.
Okay, but I hear you. Let's roll it out when it's ready to go. All right, let's do picks of the week. This is where we go around the horn. We share something related to weather, and let's start with Troy. Do you, sir, have a pick of the week?
I do, and this is something that I have not done before, but I think it's great. I was thinking about this earlier today. Folks, if you don't get this magazine, WeatherWise magazine, it is such a great one. And the reason I mention it is because the latest edition talks about, and it goes to Barb's, I think you have to understand the history and how this is all developed. The 10 most daring meteorological adventures in history as part of this one. Doug Hildebrand has done a great article on building a weather-ready nation in this edition. But I think the thing that I appreciated the most is the 2019-2020 U.S. snow report, which they do every year, and really a great summary over the last year. The thing that I will mention, and it's just my sort of bringing a couple of things to your attention. I did not realize until I saw this, Barb, that, and they mentioned actually in looking at the snow events last year, that Utqiagvik or Barrow, Alaska, this is one of the first years that we don't have a snow climatology. That's an old WSO site, and it's one of those Alaska sites, and we don't have a good snow climatology. And I'm really hoping that we can get those back in Alaska. I realize it's an area where it's rough to be able to get those, but we have such a rich snow history for Barrow, Alaska in history. And now in the last year, that has kind of failed as a result of the WSO closing there. So I just noticed that in the snow part of WeatherWise. And also another thing too, and I'd be real interested in knowing this, we're going on 2 months now that the auto launcher for the Raywinson in Barrow has been out of service due to ground equipment problems. And I don't know, Michael, if that may be because they don't allow travel from Fairbanks, maybe to Barrow to repair that because of the travel restrictions. But I know it's rough. I've been to Barrow 2 or 3 times to the WSO before, so I know how rough it can be to get there. But no Raywinson sounding for Barrow almost for 2 months now because of a problem with the auto launcher there. So just a little plug for WeatherWise, and that's my picks of the week.
Awesome. And all these will be up on weatherbrains.com. Okay, Barb, I see your pick in the chat room here. What you got there?
I'm going to boost a friend of mine who wrote an awesome book called The Beautiful Snow, The Ingalls Family, the Railroads, and the Hard Winter of 1880 to 1881 by Cindy Wilson. So I said I'm writing a book. She already wrote hers and has published it. And she focuses very closely on the railroad history during the winter of 1880 to 1881. She went down deep into their archives of the different rail lines and found some great information. She dug into newspaper records, has a lot of great stuff in here. And if you were interested in the stories I was telling, you'll be interested in this. TheBeautifulSnow.com.
Awesome. And again, the links will be up on weatherbrains.com. And I love this period we talked about tonight. This is when I started doing weather on television back in 1880. So that's awesome. All right. So we got Michael back. We were talking about Morse code and you blew the internet up. So you're back.
You've got to put a dime in Zoom there, didn't you, Mike?
It was that dark web or something. I don't know. I was clicking away on something. I don't know. So I won't talk anymore about that. Hey, you know what? Is it my turn to say pick? Is it my pick?
Yep. Go.
Skywarn recognition day is coming up. So it's got to be weather.gov, CRH, Skywarn recognition. I pushed a link out there. I don't expect people to remember that, but yeah, sign up, join us. There's 650 as of this morning, 650 people registered. And I didn't check it tonight before I got on. I'm sure we're pushing 700. We just want to make this thing work. We want it to be rich. We want it to be engaging. We want it to be 24 hours of recognizing the contributions observers and citizen scientists make to make our job easier to save lives. That's Skywarn Recognition Day.
And if you didn't pick that, I'd be worried about you. All right, Bill Murray, go.
Yeah, James, you need a pipe and slippers if you're going to use that background. I'm just saying.
Yeah, a smoking jacket.
Yeah, you need a smoking jacket for sure. I want to thank Jay Farlow for pointing out Michael to us. Thanks, Jay, for that. Jay always is a great proponent of the show. Sean Potter is our guest next week. We'll be talking about Cleveland Abbey. He has a great column in Weatherwise every month, Troy, as you know, and is a great weather historian also. And I know what James's pick is. James, have you given your pick yet?
No, in fact, I'll give my pick and then you can give yours. Have you guys seen this AMS band?
The weather band?
Weather band. When I first saw that, I thought they were looking, for a rock and roll guitar guy and a drummer and, a bass player. Yeah, banjo player.
And that's kind of the theme of it a little bit, is a musical.
Yes.
But.
So, and I honestly have never, I really don't know much about this, Bill. You kind of explain this because I'm trying to figure this out.
I just read about it from your pick. It kind of snuck up on me.
I think
Nate on here.
As I understand, it's just weather enthusiasts. It's a way for the AMS.
Really?
The AMS to include people, AMS has sort of been this academic type of society through the years. And I think the AMS, and I think a good decision that they're being more inclusive and want to get the hobbyist, people like that maybe just have an interest in weather. And I commend them for it.
Yeah. So. $26 a year, James, you could, I'm not stealing your thunder, but you get a 40% discount on Weatherwise.
I kind of figured that's the deal, and that they're trying to, because, the AMS, you think of pinheads and academia and, no, that's what you think of.
Not you, Barb.
Resemble that remark, Barb?
No, I mean, look, I say, I got an AMS seal and they just think you're a pinhead when they see that. And with the NWA, it's more like, they kind of welcome the people that don't have a degree and they don't have the academic background. And I think this is a great thing if it's what I think it is. And apparently it is.
I'm jealous.
Bring in weather.
I really am.
Weather dweebs that like listen to this show, geeks, and give them a chance to get involved. So I think it's great. It sounds like that's what that is. So it's called the AMS Weather Band. And again, the link will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. So, all right, Bill, go. What you got?
And my pick is something that Barb referred to earlier. And thank you for being here tonight, Barb. This has been fascinating. All the video training of the Warning Decision Training Division is online, and that is my pick of the week.
Now, is this free, or does this cost anything?
No, it's $50. It's $50 per visit, James, and just you hit my.
It goes to
PayPal.
the Bill Murray Fund. Yeah.
My PayPal.
Hey, James, you never asked me about what my ham call was.
Well, Troy, what's your ham call?
My ham call in Austin, Texas is KE5BCK, and here in Austin they call it KE5 Better Call Kimmel.
Better
I like that.
Kimmel. I like it a lot.
Yep,
I like it a lot. When I was WB4 SVH back in the early days, I was silver-voiced hippie. And now WO4W is watching out for weather. All right, Bill, would you plug any future guests? Or are we good to go here?
Well, Sean next week is coming up. I'm excited about that. Scott Stuccio is coming up on the 14th. Then Greg will join us on the 22nd for Meteorological Memories. And I've got a secret guest that I'm trying to get for that day. If we get that, it's going to be a huge hit. Stand by.
Hey, well, listen, I got to go to take the equipment and move it over to Studio A to link up over there for the newscast. But listen, it was great having Barb and Michael on the show tonight.
Absolutely.
If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. Aubrey is our email officer. She'll be back next week. We'll do a triple email segment. But if you like us, if you hate us, drop some comments over there on Apple Podcasts. We love the comments, good and bad. And we're typically on the air every Monday night at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. On behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, everybody. That was a great show. Loved it.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Barb.
everybody.
Thank you, Michael and Barb.